don't do a restructure. Let's do a rebalance. So everybody puts their charts up, and with the manager in the room, no buying. It's not a bartering system. They can sell any one of the tasks that they don't want to do because it's high anxiety or boredom.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Scale Smart, Grow Fast podcast. Today, Dr. Kevin Gazzara is the CEO of Magna Leadership Solutions and a seasoned executive coach known for helping leaders unlock high performance by balancing the right types of work. With over 18 years at Intel and a doctorate in organizational leadership, Kevin brings deep expertise in management, team development, and emotional intelligence. His practical framework for finding flow empowers leaders to delegate wisely, focus strategically, and scale with clarity and impact. Kevin, thank you for coming on the podcast today. How are you doing?
Fantastic, Harley. Thanks for sharing me with your audience. I appreciate that.
It's my pleasure. Kevin, could you share a little bit more about your story and what brought you to helping business owners get into flow now?
Sure, I'd be glad to do that. My background, similar to yours, I think, is from a technical perspective. I did my undergrad work in engineering and business, did an MBA, and ultimately went off and did all my doctoral work in organizational leadership and management. And I spent 18 years at Intel, fantastic experience, wonderful company, learned so much, great learning culture. But I had a personal goal and I had a great mentor and coach. And at 40, I had this 10-year plan that at 50, I wanted to retire and kind of give back and go work with other companies and help them grow their leadership. Fortunately, I was able to do that. I had like I said, a great coach. I had a wonderful financial advisor. Of course, you have to have your finances in order. And at 50, myself and two of my colleagues from Intel, we decided that we were going to leave and go do what we were doing for Intel for other companies. And at the time, my last 10 years at Intel, I spent managing Intel's management leadership development for the world, their residential programs. I managed Intel University, but I really enjoyed kind of seeing kind of the light go on for executives and managers to get to the next level. And just to give you an idea, we used to train 2,500 managers and leaders in 10 different countries each year for the programs that I had developed and was managing. And when I retired 18 years ago, we had just finished training our 40,000th manager. So I got pretty good at that. And I wanted to bring that kind of knowledge and expertise and hopefully passion and enthusiasm to small to medium-sized companies, that didn't have $10 million budgets to spend. That's what's kind of my background. And I've been able to do that with lots of companies around the world, whether it's virtual or in person. And then in addition to that, I've been a professor at 6 different universities teaching management, leadership, strategy, marketing, business development kind of stuff.
Well, that's an amazing service you're offering people now with all that expertise developed from your time at Intel and now sharing it with people that don't need to have the massive budgets and staff that Intel might have and still get those great benefits. We talked about flow a little bit in the intro. What led you to develop this concept of leadership flow, and why is it so critical for executives and leaders looking to scale?
Well, first of all, let's talk about the concept of flow. I think many people kind of understand what it is, but if you don't, we'll do the 1-minute version. So flow was developed by a professor by the name of Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and he was the University of Chicago's department chair of psychology, and ultimately moved to the Drucker School of Management out in Claremont, California. And in his work in the late 80s and early 90s, he had identified this concept and he termed it flow. That's where it comes from. And what it is, it's when you have the right balance of challenge and skill. When your skill meets the right challenge, you get into flow. And in the 90s, it was retermed as being in the zone. So people probably understand being in the zone. When you can get in the zone, and the easiest way to tell if you're in the zone, there's 8 different factors that contribute to it. But the one that is probably the most prevalent is where the sense of time becomes severely distorted, where you're working on something, and you look up at the clock and you think it's 9 o'clock and it's midnight, right? Well, the clock must be broken, right? That can't be right, where you've lost 3 hours or 4 hours or whatever amount of time. And that's kind of an indication that you're in flow. And I was always fascinated by this concept. And I had this belief that if people could get into flow and stay in flow a majority of their time, when I've interviewed people have experienced that, but it's not a daily occurrence. It just doesn't happen daily, even if they're highly involved in their jobs. And that always kind of puzzled me why you couldn't do that. So when I was working with some different consultants, when I was at Intel and I was finishing my a doctoral degree, I had this concept. I had a staff, and I would go into like my staff member's cubicle. And I remember like the first person would say, boy, I love working on task A and I hate task B and C. And all these people were the same background, same behavioral style, same working kind of style, very, very similar people, same education levels and experience. And I walk into the next cubicle and person would say, boy, I love A and C, but I hate B. And the next person would say, I love C, but I hate A and B. And I thought, boy, why is that? Why is it that there are certain tasks that very, very similar people, or I would look at as very, very homogenous? Why would that be? So I had this hypothesis that each one of us has a different preference for task types. And if you could identify that preference, right? And there's 3 tasks that we do on a regular basis. There are routine tasks, doing email or repetitive kind of things. There are troubleshooting tasks or problem solving where things come in and, something's on fire and you have to fix it. And then there's project tasks, and there's some great work that was done by a guy by the name of William Daniels at American Training and Consulting. And what he found is that those are the 3 tasks that we do. And if you can identify them, what I wanted to prove was that each one of us would have a different balance. There's like 496 unique mixtures of these tasks. Hypothesis was that if you could give people the right balance of tasks, regardless of the tasks that they're doing, that you could raise their motivation, engagement, and get them into flow. That was my connection with flow. And I had read Flow back in 96, and it was just life-changing for me. It's such a simple concept. So I wrote to Dr. Chick-Sing Mihai, said, hey, I'm doing my doctoral dissertation on this. I want to see if I can expand your concept of flow. Would you be on my committee to help me develop an assessment for that? And for those people that kind of hang on to here, I'm going to give you these. I'll give away a link so they can take the assessment that he and I developed, and I'll give it away for. Normally we charge for it, but we'll give it away for free. So that's what I ended up doing. I finished the dissertation, quantitative dissertation. It's published. Anybody can read it. I'm not sure that you want to read it. It's not really good bedtime reading. And ultimately what I found was that if you could identify that right mixture and you can give that mixture to a person on a regular basis, a daily basis, like I structure my day around those type of tasks and a certain cadence. And if you can do that, we know that it will raise your motivation. It'll raise your engagement in the work. There's some additional work that was done by some other people doing research extended my theory, and it also raises your level of feeling empowered. Doesn't guarantee flow, but it works incredibly well with flow. So that's what we've been doing, and we kind of use that kind of as a foundation for a lot of the leadership programs that we do in our Leading Forward Academy and other workshops.
That's really fascinating. So with these 3 kind of classes of work or tasks that you mentioned, have you found that to get in that flow state, it's like a mixture of like a ratio of time spent, or is it like an order of operations of those? Or is it like they're really just good at doing like the project and it's best if they don't do any of the other 2 types?
No, actually what we found, that's a great question. What we found, Harley, was that you have to identify your cadence. And I'll give you an example. My cadence is, so I have and I'm going to use raw numbers, not exact numbers, but my cadence is I need about 50% project work during the day, about 30% troubleshooting, and about 20% routine work. So what I typically do, and I would encourage anybody that after they take the assessment and you identify your mixture, is to kind of figure out what the cadence is of the tasks that you can do, because they're different times. And what I mean by cadence is, as you're working on, let's say, just kind of going through email, reading email, delete, add, respond, those kind of things, very, very routine kind of work. At a certain point in time, you kind of get bored, or you want to go do something else. You want to go get a cup of coffee or pick up the phone or go read something else. That's usually the indicator that you need to move from that task type to another task type in order to keep that engagement going. And typically what happens is a lot of people that don't understand that move from one task that's the same type. It's a different task, but it's the same type. And the challenge is it really reduces your ability to kind of get into flow. So for me, routine is I can do about 30 minutes of routine work, can do about an hour to hour and 15 minutes of troubleshooting, and project work kind of lands right around 2 hours. And if you can kind of structure your day, so like, for example, like this week, I'm working on a new course. right? And it's going to take me about 8 hours to do that. So what I do is I schedule 2-hour blocks throughout the week rather than what I used to do in college. If anybody else listening has had this experience, is like, I'm going to lock myself in the dorm on Friday, I'm going to write that paper, and finish all those problems and so forth, and about, an hour, 2 hours into it, that you're off doing something else, wandering around the dorm or whatever. And that's really an indication that because you're focusing on one singular kind of task, that your brain is not there. And then it's going to get very distractive, and starting and restarting, particularly after you're distracted, is a little bit difficult to do and not overly productive. So the key is figure out your cadence. Don't bulk processes like Tuesday's my day to catch up on those 400 emails that I haven't done. Don't do that, right? Because it's going to kind of feel like drudgery, although at the end of the day, you may feel satisfied. The thing is you won't have that degree of satisfaction. And each one of the task types gives you a different degree of frequency and intensity. So, for example, routine work is high frequency, low intensity feedback, right? Delete, 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 delete. It's very small satisfaction there. In reference to that, troubleshooting is probably medium frequency. It's not happening instantaneously, and medium feedback. And then that project work, when I finish that project at the end of the week, or finish all my taxes, I develop the course and deliver it, or you have that new machine installed if you're a machinist or an engineer. That's, even though you've only had that one accomplishment for the week, that degree of accomplishment is significantly higher. The reason that we have a different preference for the different task types is that we have a different need of that type of feedback, of that type of reinforcement. Some of us need lots of little pieces of reinforcement, have a high degree of routine, and others, like myself, need a little bit more of the project work. And I'm okay not getting feedback, till the project's done on Friday, rather than, having to say, I was finished each day a new project.
No, that's perfect sense. And one thing that kind of stood out to me, and a question I had was, when someone's working with you, they've identified the cadence of those different tasks that they need to be in. How do they stay consistent in being in that cadence so that they can maintain flow? I imagine it can be easy to get distracted or lose focus, or have those fires that come up and maybe give them more attention than they should. How do you help people stay focused and in the flow?
There's wonderful books on productivity out there. David Allen is, I think, the king of that, how to get work done and so forth. But there's lots and lots of articles. In fact, I just wrote an article on the Pomodoro method connected to flow and this concept. Anybody wants to just do Kevin Gazzara and Pomodoro, you'll be able to find that. Pomodoro is the, working in chunks of time. I think the thing is if you're working on a task and you're highly engaged, like, for example, if I'm in a troubleshooting task and I know I have about an hour before I get distracted, but it's much more involved and I'm still engaged, right, that I am focused and I'm not thinking about other things, my recommendation to the people is you stay there. Don't stop. The key is that you don't want to stop if you're kind of engaged in the flow. You'll know when you're out of the flow, when you don't feel like you're part of that activity, that you're doing the activity, but you're thinking about something else. So the other thing is, I think two things, Harley, that's important. First is that you have to get rid of the distractions, right? So you have to turn off the email, you have to turn off the buzzing phones and, your Alexa telling you there's a new package that has arrived. You have to turn that stuff off. And a lot of executives that I coach tell me, well, I can't do that because, I am in need. So what we do is we have a process that's pretty simple. It says you need to work time on your calendar, that first thing. So, and you need to have a voicemail message and an email message that just says, I am not currently available. I'm working on a project. If you want to put that level of detail in there, if this is urgent, you can text me, right? So you can still have the text kind of going off as that, but in an emergency. And what we found is most executives probably get 10% maybe of those items are urgent. But what it says is, hey, I'm working on this from 9 to 12, and I will be available from 12 to Pacific time or whatever it is. So people know that they can get you. And if it truly is urgent, is to use a texting feature. You want to keep that one on as opposed to the other announcements. And if you can do that, what you'll find is that you manage your time better. And then people are going to start really proactively thinking he's not available during this time. That's when we're going to have the meeting. So I need to move it to a different time. So that's the first thing that you need to do. And the second thing you need to do is you need to get a partner. We call them capability partners rather than accountability partners. And on a daily basis or somewhat regular basis, you need to check in and say, here's what I'm going to be working on and accomplish today. Because most people get this long laundry list of all the things they're going to do. And at the end of the day, the 10 things that they had to do, they've gotten 2 done. And then the 8 carry over and there's another 10 to add. By the end of the week, you feel incredibly demotivated because you've just added to it. You started out with a list of 10, you end up with a list of 30 when you're done. So yes, those 2 things is structure your distractions and then also get an accountability partner or coach, mentor, whatever you want to call them, and work with them so that you can kind of report back to them. And it's not from a policing perspective, it's really from what could I do differently? The one thing that we do know, because I've done a lot of these kind of coaching sessions with executives, what we do know is on average, there's usually about a 2.5 multiplier that if I say, hey, this is going to take me 2 hours to get done, it's usually about 5 hours, right? 2.5 times that. And you have to be able to account for it. As we're going through and I'm helping people do the first cut, there's this, okay, this is going to take an hour. So we're going to block 2.5 hours for that. And it's like, oh, it's not going to take me that long. We're going to block 2.5 hours for that. And then if you're finished in an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it is before that block is done, that's going to be your time. But you know that you've given it sufficient amount of time to get things done. So if you can do that, things will feel a lot more motivating. Plus, the other thing is what we do know is that people take on way, way more than they can handle. What they don't account for, we used to call this at Intel, ATBR, keeping the business running. And when people take on projects, they take on projects as if they don't have to keep the business running. And when we've done analysis, I'd say most of the people that are doing work, there's probably about 80% of your time is just keeping the business running. Right, it's doing the troubleshooting. It's responding to the emails. It's working on things that have to get fixed or enhanced for your team. And then there's the project work additional on top of that. People don't have an understanding of where their time goes, and that's one of the first things you need to do. You need to figure out where's my time going. And once you've kind of done that inventory, you'd be very, very surprised that a lot of the time where you think it's going, it's going somewhere else.
Every day, your top performers are buried under emails, scheduling, and reporting. Work that doesn't move the needle. The result? Frustration, burnout, and worst of all, lost revenue. That's why we created the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers, a simple, battle-tested framework to eliminate busy work and unlock your team's full potential. Inside, you'll get the exact steps top executives use to retain A players, boost productivity, and free up their team for high-impact work. Stop losing revenue. Go to workergenics.com/growthhub or check the episode notes to download the Executive's Guide to Scaling High Performers now. Well, that time inventory is so important. And oftentimes when people do the time inventory, they realize there's a lot of tasks maybe that could be delegated. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. Delegation is essential for many things. It often can be misused, however. What point does it make sense to bring on like a dedicated executive level support, like an executive assistant, to help free up that mental bandwidth, maybe serve as that accountability partner and help people stay in flow?
Great question. The process that we use based around this task balance is, and the assessment that people are going to get, it's called the Task Quotient, or TQ. And one of the things that I did, in fact, I just flew to Washington, D.C. to do this with a company, was that we get everyone to track their tasks that they're doing, usually for at least for a week, 1 or 2 weeks is ideal. One, to give them the awareness of where is my time going. That's the first thing they do. Second thing that they do is we have them, once they have that, we have them plotted on a grid. We don't tell them it's flow. And then when you do the overlay, it shows which tasks are placing you anxiety, which tasks are placing you on boredom. And because they're tracking the task and they're identifying them based around the different task types, it tells them I have too much routine work or not enough troubleshooting or too much project, whatever that is. And once they have that map, then what we do is we do what we call a task auction. So everybody plots this. You can do it virtually. It works really, really well live around the room. So we did this with, I think it was about 18 managers. They were merging 3 departments together. With the client that I had, I said, don't do a restructure. Let's do a rebalance. So everybody puts their charts up, and with the manager in the room, no buying. It's not a bartering system. They can sell any one of the tasks that they don't want to do because it's high anxiety or boredom, right? And then once you have that Excel sheet and everybody said, here's what I want to get rid of, and you can sell all your job if you want, then we begin the task auction, and you can say, hey, I'm interested in what Harley's got. He has 6 hours of project work. I can't take all 6, but I can split it. I can do 3. Maybe Joe can work with Harley to do that. And then because you're interested in getting rid of it and they're interested in taking it on, at the end of the day, everybody's happy because they've chosen they can do. And typically when we've done lots and lots of these, typically we can move usually on average 60 to 70%. But the last session we did in Washington, D.C., we moved with the client 82 or 83% of that. Now, to answer your question, so you've got this other 12% or 20% or whatever, there's usually some bucket of stuff that happens that the people kind of identify as craft work. And most of it is administrative. And that's really where having the ability to be able to say, hey, so rather than hiring that $120,000 engineer to do the service calls, why don't we hire a virtual assistant? Or why don't we hire an administrative person to be able to do this? We're going to pay them $40,000 or whatever the number is, and we're going to save that $80,000. Because typically what happens is over time, as resources get squeezed, more and more of the administrivia work kind of creeps in, and you don't recognize it until you kind of take that step back and you do the plotting. And the process has worked incredibly well. I did a case study on it. You go to my site, magnaleadership.com, look at TQ or Task Quotient. There's a case study right in there. We did it for an IT organization. And I think the big change was we saved them this was many years ago, we saved them about $50,000. But more importantly, what we did is we tracked the level of job satisfaction, motivation, engagement, and turnover for that department. And we got it from, I think it was like a 16% turnover. And we maintained that I think we tracked it for 3 months or 6 months, and we got the turnover to go to 0, but we raised the engagement or the job satisfaction of the people 26%. That was huge. If you can move at anything, do behavioral science more than about 4%, we were able to do that, right? So it's really a win-win. And it's just taking that pause and rebalancing the tasks rather than that restructuring. Intel used to do lots of restructuring. And if anybody's worked in a big company where you've had to you come in one day and it's like, okay, everything is going to change. It just kind of rattles you. But if you go through this process, generally you have the right people. You don't have to do restructuring. It's just you like doing A and I like doing B. Let's figure out a way to get that to happen. You had a second question with regard to delegation. And I have a super easy, and we teach this in our Leading Forward Academy program, super easy way to delegate. First of all, we're talking about delegating and not dumping. Dumping is I'm giving you stuff I don't want to do, right? And it's also stuff you don't want to do. That's dumping. Delegating, what we tell the leaders is there's only one question you have to ask yourself. If by holding on to this task that I am doing, am I hindering that other person's development? Can they be learning something from this? Does that allow them to advance? Does it give them new knowledge? Does it give them a new experience? You can probably do it in an hour. It's going to take them 4 hours to do it. You have to be able to take that hit. And that doesn't mean that you don't mentor them or coach them or do some training or whatever, or you're there for them. But if you have the ability to take that hit where it's not immediately due, of course, something's on fire, you have to just jump in and use your expertise to do that. If you can do that, even though it may take a little bit more time, ultimately the next time, that 4 hours, it's going to take them 2 hours. And ultimately they're going to get to your level. That's our model for how do you delegate. Is you just have to answer that question. If the answer is yes, and you can take the hit of time, absolutely take the hit of time.
I love that. One question I ask myself and my wife and our business is if we're doing something that is not in our flow, we'll say, how do I never have to do this again? And that makes it seem, a lot more worth making that investment in training someone properly and getting them set up to do it, because then once that's set up, you really never have to do it again. And it's a really powerful and motivating feeling. One thing I wanted to just touch on again was that task auction you brought up, and something a lot of people maybe struggle with when they're thinking about letting go of some of those tasks is if they don't like it, they might view that task as being bad or put a label on it and feel guilty about giving it to someone else, thinking you're giving them your garbage, or, who else would want to do this task? It's an awful task. I hate doing it. When in reality that you've demonstrated with the task auction is there's people out there that want it.
Yeah, because typically what happens is that people have different levels of expertise and experience. And you can have that conversation with them. What you may think is something that they don't want to do really is that something that they do want to do or should be doing to build themselves, kind of build their career and their skills. That you have to have that conversation. So that's the difference between delegating and dumping, right? Dumping is, I'm going to give this to you. I think it'd be good for you or whatever, but have that conversation with them whenever you can.
Awesome. Well, Kevin, you have shared some incredible, valuable lessons with our audience today. If people want to get that operation assessment, what's the best way for them to get that and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I set up a special link for you, Harley. And if they go to Magna Leader, MAGNA leader.co, not com, .co / and then all in caps, gift, GIFT, magnaleader.co / gift. You'll be able to access that and you can take the assessment. It will take you less than 5 minutes to do that. And you'll get your report back right away. And it will identify, based on how you answered the questions, your ideal kind of task mixture and task balance. And then I did do a paper that I delivered at the University of Austin many years ago, which was like a 4 or 5 page summary of my dissertation and talks about why all the statistical analysis and quantitative work that we had done to basically prove the theory. It's not just Kevin's idea, that we actually proved that it does work. So if they want that paper, they can send me an email, kevin@magnaleadership.com, and I'd love to connect with them. And anybody listening to this, is if you'd like to talk through any of these concepts, I love talking about it. It's been my passion. I did my dissertation work over 20 years ago and been able to apply it both at Intel and outside. Is that if you send me an email or connect with me on LinkedIn, Kevin Gazzara, there's only one of me there. I promise you, absolutely, I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm not going to try to convince you to hire me or whatever. If I can be helpful, great. And if you do want to work with me in the future, I'd be glad to entertain that. But you're not going to get a sales pitch from me. I just want to be able to help you get better.
Awesome. Well, thank you for those 3 amazing offers for our audience today. And to those of you listening, if you got value from this episode, do one quick thing. Hit like and subscribe so you don't miss future strategies to help you scale smarter. And maybe you know a business owner or a colleague who could use this information. Share this episode with them. It could be exactly what they need right now. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, leave us a quick star rating. It helps us reach more leaders like you. Thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you in the next one.